Good afternoon. Welcome to our webinar. This is an impromptu entry in our regular Gateway to College webinar series. My name is Nick Mathern, Vice President of K-12 Partnerships for Achieving the Dream. We know that across the country, educators are scrambling to move their instruction online quickly as a result of campus closures as our institutions do their part to reduce transmission of the coronavirus. For alternative schools and programs serving vulnerable students, or for students from low-income families, we know that this moment is not only a disruption of their academic momentum, but it also presents a risk of disconnecting them from work and other crucial services. And perhaps most significantly, this poses a risk to leave them feeling isolated. We hope the strategies and resources we discuss today can help you ameliorate those risks for your students. Before we begin, a brief word about our program and our organization for those of you who may not be familiar with us. Gateway to College is a college-based high school completion program for students who have left high school without a diploma. Gateway is a dual enrollment early college program for students who are unlikely to go to college or even finish high school. In addition to the college classes, Gateway's key ingredient is personalized relationships between students and coaches, often called resource specialists. Those relationships are crucial to fostering students' sense of belonging to their campus community. And in light of the current conditions, we know all students across the country will need our best efforts to help them feel connected to something beyond their four walls. The Gateway to College network is supported by our organization, Achieving the Dream. Achieving the Dream is a network of hundreds of community colleges striving to ensure equitable education outcomes for all students, especially low-income students and students of color. If you would like to learn more about Gateway to College or Achieving the Dream, visit our website at gatewaytocollege.org or the website here, or email us at gatewaytocollege@achievingthedream.org. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce today's presenters. We will first hear from Dr. Devora Sharma, our Director of Research. Dr. Sharma has considerable experience teaching online and has studied youth development. We will also be hearing from Ariel Wilburn. Ariel is a former resource specialist for the Gateway to College program at Roger Williams University, and she is currently the Assistant Director of Admissions at Delaware Valley University. Ariel's contribution comes via an interview she did just 2 days ago with our New England Director of Gateway to College, Stephanie Davalos. With that, I will turn this over to Dr. Sharma. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. In addition to being the Director of Research here at Achieving the Dream, have also been teaching online for about 10 years, both undergraduates and graduates. So what you're going to hear today is a compilation of what we've learned as Gateway to College instructors providing holistic student support and what I've learned about online instruction. We are taking a broad view. Obviously, we've put this content together quite quickly and things have changed even since we announced the webinar. So please be patient with us. If you have questions, please just put them in the Q&A or the chat box, and we will save some time at the end of the webinar to address what questions you have. So we are going to break this up into about 3 parts. I'm going to start by talking about student support. As Nick mentioned, that really is a key component of our Gateway to College programs. And then we'll talk a little bit about online instruction and briefly touch on also how we support each other as program staff, instructors, and faculty who are now making this rapid pivot. Okay, next slide. So for student support, what we really want to do is think about these kind of 3 anchors of student support that we want to be focused on during this time. Our primary goal is to really build our relationships and maintain the relationships that we have in place from our face-to-face work. We also want to acknowledge mental health because I think everybody is feeling a little anxious in this time of uncertainty and with, you know, rules and conditions changing daily. And then we also want to think about basic needs. So before we jump into any of these, one of the things we all want to do and need to do is just figure out what the existing resources are. I know these are also changing daily, but be paying attention to what your colleges, school districts, and community are providing for emergency aid. I know a lot of nonprofits are mobilizing to provide either cash or other things. And then also what counseling services are available, any academic services that are still in place at the college or school district. And also a number of the K-12 schools are finding ways to create to-go meals to replace free and reduced lunch programs. So knowing what's available and just kind of keeping tabs so that you can pass that information on to students will be important. Okay, next slide, great. All right, so as we're thinking about maintaining relationships, obviously our primary mode of doing this in terms of seeing them either in class or in the hallway or as they check in for the day is gone. And so we really need to use a variety of tools. Basically, we just want to stay in regular contact with them. So whether that is text messaging, getting students into chat rooms, using conference calls, creating social media events, all of these tools will help us maintain that relationship, keep students engaged, and then also encourage them to be reaching out to us with things like basic needs. We also really want to think about how we are helping them maintain their sense of belonging to your program, whether that's college-based or K-12-based. So ways to connect them with their peers, doing little contests on social media, having students share photos of where they're working or their pets or, you know, what meals they're making as we're all stuck at home, are just ways to kind of continue to build that sense of community so that we maintain their identities as college students or K-12 students, depending on what programs you're working in. Okay. So part of doing this remote support is going to really be focusing on, you know, doing regular contact and being innovative and creative. We are lucky to have Ariel Wilburn has recorded some information for us. She was in a position when she made a job change from being a what we call a resource specialist or an advisor in a Gateway to College program to another college where she actually needed to do support remotely. She was staying on as the advisor for the transition period. So you're going to hear from her what tools she used and what advice she has for all of us as we make this quick pivot to supporting our students that we were used to seeing face-to-face.
At the time in that Gateway program, and I had become that direct access for them, that direct resource over the past, I want to say 9 months to a year for those students. And so anywhere from the age of about 16 and my oldest student's 24, they were still going through the regular challenges. I had a student who had just recently had a baby, a student who was going through some issues in the court system in terms of children go in custody and just different battles like that. And so we decided that it was best that I remained sort of the face, the point of contact for those students and to not shake things up. And I will say the biggest tool that we used was cell phones, FaceTiming, text messages, and calling students. For me, I was using my lunch breaks while I was at Delaware Valley to FaceTime and call students just to sort of check in. I think the biggest difference that's going on right now is that there's no point of contact face to face. It all needs to be done virtually. Whereas for myself, I was sort of the point of contact to support what was happening face to face.
Right.
And so students were attending class in person, and I could see I was getting data fed to me, whether they were late to class or if they didn't show up to class, which allowed me to get sort of nip it in the bud pretty immediately of like, I know you didn't attend class today, what's going on? And that was, I think that was our biggest goal, is just attendance. We really needed students to show up to class, and that was the best way to give them a shot at passing those classes.
And so you carved out a specific time, lunch break, to do that work, and it was really the phones that served you well. Do you have any advice in terms of messaging, in terms of support? How did students handle the break in your physical presence? Because, you know, there was a lot of respect and rapport and care you had built up with them over time. Did it translate beautifully? Like, how was it?
Yeah, it translated pretty seamlessly. They kind of laughed the first FaceTime calls. It was like, wait, this is really weird. So going through that, yeah, this is weird, but this is our sort of new easy normal. I tried to just make it as seamless as possible. I did try, like, I would text them and give them a heads up, like, hey, I'm gonna FaceTime you in 20 minutes, or I'm gonna FaceTime you tomorrow at this time, depending on who the student was, just so that they weren't like caught off guard, and they can make sure they were in a decent space to FaceTime me. And I even had some students that didn't feel comfortable over FaceTime. They just wanted to talk on the phone, and I was fine with that too. So I think the biggest advice is just be fluid in how students can reach out to you and be available. It's so much easier when they have somebody that they can depend on to text them back. And I tell students all the time, it takes 2 seconds to send a text message. There's no reason, you know, not to get back to me in that regard. So it kind of worked in my benefit, because that's what they do anyway. So I think, you know, as adults, sometimes we look at our phones, and if there's work happening through our personal phones, it's like, I really don't want to deal with this right now. But I think for students, just being that person who's going to be accessible and being clear on what your expectations are for them as you move through this really weird time of virtual learning, I think goes a long way.
Right. And you were able to put that, you know, you were in a new pretty significant role and had relocated for that role. How did you manage your own well-being and your own, you know, stuff to continue to be that presence? Because this is a moment of pretty significant change for all of us. What are the tools that you use to keep yourself solid in those moments of change and transition?
I turn my notifications off of sound. I'm a big, like, I just want my phone to vibrate and not sort of harass me. And I think being honest with folks and where you are. I think sometimes the problem with virtual connection or text messages and people just having access to your personal lines like that is it could get overwhelming. I did have a student that would text me every single day, like back to back, and it gets to a point where you do have to put up a boundary, like, hey, I'm going to answer this question for you, but I need a few hours. I'm doing this, or I'll get back to you at such and such a time. So I think just being as transparent as possible and just being honest, like with their sort of expectations of you. It's like, yes, I understand that this may be an emergency for you, but I'm telling you right now, it's not an emergency. Nobody's hurt. We're gonna get to solve this problem. And then actually solving the problem. So I think students seeing that follow up and seeing that I may have needed an hour or two to answer their questions, but that I was going to get back to them and they could depend on me to get those answers was a big sort of deal for students, especially when they were having issues in a class and they were worried that it was going to interrupt their progress. Just being able to say, you know what, it's going to be okay. This is how we're going to solve it. It may take 24 hours, but it'll get solved. And that sort of was the biggest one of those challenges is that
Mhm.
expectation of instant gratification, that if I send Ariel a text, she's gonna fix my problems right here, right now.
Right.
So yeah.
Being clear that that's not always going to happen.
Right,
But
right. And I think
you will be responsive.
right. And I think as like I said, even if you can't solve the problem, but you let them know, like, I'm working on it, I'll get back to you. This is around the time I think I can get back to you. I think that goes, I know for a fact it goes a long way with students.
For sure.
Let me just say that, like many others around the country, as you are all being promoted to principal of your own homeschool, Dr. Sharma is facilitating this webinar for us today at the same time as she's helping her mother relocate from the hospital back to her home. So we are all doing multiple things at once today, and we appreciate your patience and hope that you all are able to navigate both your professional and your personal duties equally gracefully.
Great, thanks, Nick. Yes, as we are all juggling lots and lots of balls in the air, and that's going to be true for all of us going forward. And actually was one of the things that Ariel mentioned, was that she was just really authentic with her students about that. So when they were reaching out to her and, you know, clearly in frantic emergency zone, and she had her other work, you know, her new position to attend to, that she would just send them a quick text and say, I understand this feels like an emergency. I need a few hours, but I want you to know I'm working on it. Or I need 24 hours, but I want you to know I'm working on it, and you'll hear from me by X. And I think that's going to be a really important strategy for all of us. It helps keep students connected so they don't disappear, but it also allows you to set some boundaries, because of course all of us will be dealing with other things at home, whether it's caretaking or helping our own children do online learning if they're home. So those were a lot of the tips that we heard from Ariel. She also just really accessed every tool at her disposal. So here we have a list of some of them. In the interest of keeping things simple, if you have phone numbers and can text, that is often the easiest way to kind of keep tabs. A lot of our Gateway to College programs have used remind.com. That allows you to do group texts fairly easily. And I believe most of these virtual services have offered their services for free, at least for the next 30 days, as a way to contribute to the situation we're all dealing with. So if you need a tool, you know, search the web and see what's being offered. I also want to remind us all, especially those of us in college settings, we have a learning management system like Blackboard or Moodle or Canvas. You often can leverage that for your communication. We've also had programs that have had success with WhatsApp, and of course, using video conferencing software like we're all using right now, Skype, Zoom, WebEx. There's a few others out there, are also possibilities. Okay. So, you know, our key takeaways from relationship building are really to be present in your student's life often, nudge them, and use multiple tools. I also just want to take a moment to acknowledge that mental health is going to be a big issue for students who have depression. They're now possibly locked in very small spaces, and that's going to be really hard. Depending on their situation, they may or may not be able to go outside. I am, as Nick mentioned, in a retirement community with my parents to help with my mom, and they have literally at this point are restricting everybody to their apartments. So, you know, depression could definitely escalate. Certainly students who have anxiety issues are going to have heightened anxiety, and students who haven't had anxiety issues in the past are probably experiencing some anxiety just because everything is moving so quickly. So find out, again, what is already available. So if your campus counseling services are still open, are they doing phone calls? How are they supporting students? Do try to avoid words like apocalypse, doomsday, end times, even in jest. I know, you know, these words may feel appropriate because things are changing so radically and quickly, but those are words that are going to escalate anxiety for those students. Keep the information that we're sharing science-based, help students know where to go for reliable information, so directing them directly to the CDC and WHO website. Encouraging breaks from news and social media. So really, you know, this could be done as a contest of, let's see, you know, how many of us can stay off social media for 2 hours, engage them in a group chat to stay off, or repurpose social media for some fun sharing or contests and group building activities so that they're not constantly chained to the news. I know many of your communities and colleges have their own local crisis lines, so have those at the ready to refer students to. Nationally, crisistextline.org is open to everybody. They access it through text. If you go to their website, they have the information for you to share with students. They also have some advice that they are providing to all of us supporting students. Their counselors, they're volunteers, but they do go through training, and they are all working remotely already, so they've been able to pivot very quickly to continue to provide support. Okay. All right, and then of course, basic needs. We know students are also going to be in the situation of losing income, especially if they were working in restaurants or service industries. All of them are going to have issues at home if their parents, their children are now home and they need to deal with child care and how to work on school. Food security may be a big issue. So again, know what the local resources are, help your students access K-12 systems that are providing food for pickup for the dual enrolled students or K-12 students you're working with. You know, you don't have to be an expert, but just having some places to go and helping students to Google what is available to them is going to be really helpful. The Hope Center at Temple, led by Sarah Goldberg-Robb, has a guide that has lots of helpful information. The link is here. Again, we'll be sending this out. You can also just Google Hope Center at Temple University and it'll come right up for you. And then along with basic needs, as we are all making this rapid pivot to online, you do want to check in with your students and see how they are accessing the internet. So just knowing whether they actually have internet connections at home or if they're using their phones will help you think about how you're doing online instruction. So as we move into moving your face-to-face instruction to online, one of the things I really want everyone to think about is you're keeping it simple. This is a temporary situation. You're not going to be able to create the perfect class. When I build an online class, I usually take 10 to 12 weeks to put together my material. And then I work with a designer who puts it all into the learning management system and makes sure all the links work and everything is smooth. We obviously don't have that luxury right now. So what you want to do is really, again, remembering what we want to do for students is keep them engaged, keep their sense of belonging in place, and have them ready for what they're going to need to do academically when things return to normal or somewhat normal. So with that in mind, what are the key objectives of your class? You're not going to be able to get through all the same content that you would have on a regular face-to-face schedule. So what are the absolute key pieces that you need students to learn? And then think about what are your expectations around that. And we'll talk a little bit more about expectations in a moment. All right, so again, you're going to need some technology tools. So first and foremost, for those of you who are in a college setting or even a K-12 setting that is already using a learning management system, do as much as you can within that system. Students should already be set up. There should be IT support for that system. And you want to just leverage it as best you can. If that is not the case, again, you've got Zoom, you've got WebEx, Google Hangouts. Google also has Google Classroom, which I know they've made available to a number of organizations that already use Google. And in a pinch, you can do some work just via email. So, you know, use what is going to work best to keep students engaged and kind of just keep things moving forward. Okay, so in terms of expectations, we're going to be walking a line during this time of creating structure, because structure makes all of us feel a little better and more comfortable, but also clearly messaging that we can be flexible, because as you know, folks are dealing with changes in their circumstances every day, and they've got a lot of other things that they're trying to manage and are going to take up time. So if you're giving assignments, have clear expectations for what those due dates are. If you're expecting students to participate in discussions or participate in actual video calls such as this one at a specific time, you know, really lay out what your expectations are for them to show up. And then also give them how you want them to communicate if they can't attend or get an assignment on time. We want to really work with students flexibly. So let them know, do they need to email, do they need to text? And just keep reiterating that as long as they reach out to you, that we can work with them to help them make progress in the course. And then you want to really be checking in on student progress. So, and think about how often you're doing that. So this goes to creating some structure for yourself. Are you going to, especially those of you who may be teaching multiple courses, are you going to spend, you know, a certain amount of time each day checking in on each one? Are you checking in every other day? So students should expect things to not turn around for 48 hours or weekly. Just, again, be authentic. Share with them what your plan is. And let them know how quickly you plan to respond to their questions, whether those are coming through the LMS, emails, texts, whatever. You know, I usually tell my online students to expect an answer from me within 24 hours, and if they don't, that they should nudge me because it may have fallen to the bottom of my inbox. You know, it doesn't matter if it's 24 hours or 48 hours, just having that expectation so students don't send you a question and then expect something to show up in their inbox within 5 minutes. And then you really need to model being present and engaged, so giving feedback often. And again, that can even be a note to everybody saying, you know, things have gone crazy. I was hoping to get things graded by the end of today, but it's actually not going to be done until Friday. That's just keeping them engaged and modeling for them the communication we want them to have with us as we all work through this unprecedented situation. All right, so attendance looks a little different in an online class. Obviously, we're not counting students who come in, unless, of course, you are doing a video chat in real time, which is a perfectly acceptable way to mimic some of your face-to-face courses. If you're doing that, you certainly want to be looking at your list of participants and taking attendance. But if you go the asynchronous route where there are assignments with deadlines and discussions and those type of activities, your LMS will let you see how often students have logged in and, quite frankly, how long they've been engaged in the LMS. So when I'm teaching, I would at least weekly kind of go down my list of students and make sure everybody has been on that week. For, you know, if it's gateway students, I would be doing that every other day or maybe even daily. And then students who were not present or hadn't logged in, I just shoot them a quick note. You know, I noticed you weren't logged on. Is there something going on that I should know about? Do you need some help with the accessing the technology? How can I help? So it's just, again, that goes back to that relationship building we talked about at the beginning, and really just letting students know that you see them and you notice if they're there or not. And then when I do that, I will message them through the LMS directly, but if I have email or text contact information, I'm also going to reach out that way, because of course, if they're having trouble accessing the LMS, they're not going to see that communication. Okay, so we want to really provide support to our students as they're doing this. For some of them, this will be brand new for them as it is for us. So as we mentioned earlier, having really clear expectations about what type of participation we're looking for, reaching out to those students who are absent or not logging in. Know what IT support is still available from the college. So IT is the department that's probably most ready to pivot online, especially if you're using the LMS. There should be email and phone numbers for them so they can support students. And then also recognize that some of your students have limited access. So that goes back to doing a quick poll of your students as you start this shift. If they are only accessing things on a phone, you're going to really want to think about you know, how things look, how much information you're putting on the page. You know, even this slide might be too much information if someone's viewing it on a phone. So I might want to, if I know many of my students are just using the phone, I might really limit things to only 1 or 2 bullet points, or doing recorded little mini videos so they can just watch like a YouTube video on their phone, rather than expecting them to do something where they're navigating a whole bunch of parts of the screen. And then of course, we all just need to be kind to each other. You know, both our fellow colleagues and our students, because everybody is really feeling the enormity of this situation. Okay. All right, and then I really encourage all of you who are doing online work to do online office hours. So I always do these with my online courses. I actually run them just the way I would run office hours face-to-face. I just open a virtual office door and expect students to drop in. I do require attendance the first couple times because students will feel a little awkward about it. And it just feels foreign and different and new. So, you know, I add award points. If you guys aren't doing grading or want to move the emphasis away from grading because everybody is so nervous right now, you could just make it a quick contest of, you know, I'm gonna send an avatar, we're gonna highlight on our Twitter account the first 10 people who show up to office hours. I always offer it multiple times. When I'm teaching, I also work evenings, so I will actually offer a midday time around lunch, usually an afternoon or morning time, and then I'll even offer a time at 7:30 or 8 p.m. so that my parenting students can put their kids to bed and then join on. And then I always bring some work with me. So this is often the time that I'm going through the assignments the students have turned in or the discussions and responding to them, because I don't expect to have students in my office for the full 90 minutes. I do 90-minute sessions so that I cross the hour. So, you know, if I'm offering them at noon and I go all the way to 1:30, for students who are working or scheduling with students, if they're available either within that 12 to 1 or that 1 to 2 hour, I'm offering both of those groups a chance to join me. Okay, next slide. So what does an office hour look like? This is using a learning management system. We use Canvas here at Achieving the Dream. So I will put my office hours in the announcement at the beginning of the week. The other thing I always did was change the time every week, because again, I really wanted to make it available to students regardless of their schedules. I let them know what time. I remind them that they only have to drop in for a few minutes. I also remind them that office hours are public. So this isn't the place to talk to me about a personal issue, and remind them that they can text or email me about that. Depending on your schedule, if you have the time, sometimes I will also add a note that I can do additional office hours by request, and for them to just let me know a time that works for them. And then for office hours, we're recommending that you use Zoom or WebEx or one of the conferencing softwares, they seem to manage the traffic better than the tools within the learning management system. So I'm going to make sure that link is right here. Okay, next slide. I also use the calendar in the learning management system because then that actually comes up on the student's home screen as things that are upcoming. So again, I just create an appointment, remind them that it's office hours, and put in my Zoom link as the location. And then when it comes time to do office hours, I shoot out an email or a text telling them that I'm opening my office. I do always share my video. I let students know they don't have to, but it's good for them to be able to see us. And I make sure the chat window is open. I write a welcome note right away, so as students join, they can see that I'm there and present. I also remind them, in this case in Zoom, that to control their audio or video, it's in the bottom left-hand corner. I also allow students just to participate through the chat window. So I've often had students who were joining from a computer that didn't have a microphone or video, and so they would just ask their questions in the chat. Most of them can hear, so I would, chat them really quick and say, can you hear me? And if they can, I would speak my answers, but if not, I would just type them. I also, as students join, if there are other students on, I would say, hello, welcome, just so you know we have 3 other folks on today, and we were just talking about X, and then we just go through that. Use this time for students to talk to you about student contact, but also, again, just to be able to say, how are things going? How's the transition to doing the coursework online? You just want to make that connection with students. All right, and then use your students' strengths. Our students can share in some of the work here. I often assign students to lead discussions, and then I set them up to, I give them some structure. I tell them I want them to bring in some new material, whether that's a YouTube video or a TED Talk, and ask them questions of their fellow students, and then that I expect them to respond to their students, at least once throughout the course of the week. Students can also brainstorm activities with you. You could do that during an office hour section, or just create a discussion board for that. I've had students design their finals. I do usually have to tone them down a bit because they're always a lot more ambitious. This spreads the load. It also goes back to our goal of really keeping students engaged. All right, and then now that we've talked about all this cool stuff you can do, remember, we do need to keep it simple. We're doing this very quickly. So you really are not trying to reinvent your course right now. You want to duplicate your classes as much as possible, knowing what you were planning to do with the face-to-face course. So, you can record lectures, but at the same time, if there's already existing resources like TED Talks, you'll see on Twitter now people are sharing loads of resources with subject matter information. Go ahead and use those existing pieces, drop them in, email them, text students the link, have them watch that, and then respond. Think about how the regular activities that you do can happen online, if they can. Can students, put something together and share it? Can they create a presentation and record it so it's shared with everybody? Can you do have students put together presentations and then actually plan that everybody is going to be online on a Zoom call on Friday for an hour to share their presentation? You want to really just stick with what you've already are doing. Also, many of our Gateway programs do some of the prep courses like math and English in online curriculum like Plato. If you were doing that, you need to still be thinking about how do we remotely help students stay on track and keep them accountable to make progress? And then how do we provide that help, that tutoring that we were doing when we were having them work on this in an academic lab setting, right? So again, you could use that office hour format, either just as open office hours, or you could specifically assign it, this is going to be group tutoring for math, and have students bring their questions. So that again, we're keeping them engaged and we're just encouraging them to really log on for at least a few minutes every day. Okay, and then I almost always do group assignments. Students don't love them, but I think they'll actually may love them more right now because we are so socially isolated. In a learning management system, if you assign groups, it gives them a space to be able to create their own discussion boards. If that's not the case, you know, send students out for directions for how to create group phone calls so they can just talk to each other by phone. And just really structure your project. So I always have an individual and a group component. I don't want students to feel like all of their work is going to be graded on the work product. I set them up so students, you know, they know what the final product is, and I encourage them to assign pieces of that across the group so that students can work asynchronously and we can adapt to everybody's different work schedules. And then for the final product, you know, if it's a paper, it's a paper. But I've also had great success with students putting together a PowerPoint together. In PowerPoint, there is a button where they can record their voice presentation, so they can, you know, just record this package and share that. You know, depending on the content, you could have them build a marketing plan, build a schedule, set up activities, write lesson plans if you're teaching early childhood. Any of those things would lend themselves really well to group work. They could even just be putting together a resource list about a topic. Just thinking about ways that students can be working together and reaching out so that they're not only interacting with us as staff and faculty. Okay, and I think we're just gonna go by this. So this is Ariel again, because she was also talking a little bit about this working with students who are doing online work. She will reiterate much of what I just said. And as I said, we'll include these videos when we mail this out so that you can watch it and hear her perspective as well.
I believe the challenge was just keeping.
Oh. Alina, that just worked.
You heard the video?
Mm-hmm.
All right, I'll play it.
Them all sort of connected, but also remember so online instruction was a challenge for us, particularly for Gateway students. Mm-hmm. And I believe the challenge was just keeping them all sort of connected. But also remember, when we were doing Gateway, when we were doing online learning, I was physically there. Right. And then I became a virtual advisor, and they were doing face-to-face classes. And so I've never experienced doing both at the same time. Mm-hmm. I think the benefit here is that everything is happening virtually. And so it's really important for whoever's in the resource specialist or advising position that they're setting up a schedule that would mirror what a classroom schedule would mirror, like giving them specific times. This is a time you need to be logged in if that's how you're going to go about it, or if you're going to go about it in terms of front loading the work on the front end and having deadlines for getting that work in on the back end. Just being very clear about what those goals are and what that work looks like. And I think that's going to be the most helpful for students, is just knowing that you guys have it together and you know you're comfortable with your doing, and not letting them see sort of the panic in the moment.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know that I have a clear, direct sort of helpful answer for that, because it really is a challenge to get students who are so used to that face-to-face waiting for the teacher to tell them what to do style of learning, used to, this is a sort of open forum, this is a login as you go, pace yourself as you go kind of style. So really, I say give them timelines and give them a schedule that would mirror what that classroom would look and feel like. Even with Zoom, and just understanding what access your students have, because you may be working with students who don't have Wi-Fi set up in their homes. They don't have access to laptops with webcams. So just really understanding what students have access to and then working from there.
Right. And being really clear with expectations. And
exactly, being very clear, very direct, and constantly repeating yourself in those expectations.
Yes. Using the cell phone.
Yes.
Yeah.
Great. So with all of that, I do also want us to think about our supporting each other as staff. So although you're going to be using multiple methods to communicate with students, I think it's a good idea as staff to decide what mode of communication works best for all of you. Is that going to be email? Do you guys want to do group check-in meetings via video chat or video conferencing regularly? Are you guys going to use something like Teams or Asana or Basecamp to align and connect? So just be thinking about all of that. Also, make sure that all of your staff are getting all the college and district updates, because we know the situation is changing so rapidly. Just doing a quick check-in to make sure everybody is on the appropriate distribution list, I think is going to be really important. I highly encourage you to have regular check-in meetings with your staff. So both for you guys to express where your barriers are and to just be able to communicate what each of you has learned about students, so that we can continue to do that support across our staff, just like we do in a brick and mortar building. And of course, be sharing with each other your working from home tips. I know even at Achieving the Dream, we're already sharing some tips with each other as we all figure out the best way to set up our schedules and work. And of course, give each other some grace and kindness, because we're all just pivoting as quickly as we can. So with that, I believe we have some time for questions. So as I go through these resources, if you want to start punching some questions into the Q&A or the chat window, we'll do that. So here are just a couple of resources that we were including as we were putting this together. Stanford has a great site on best practices for teaching online that are in this same vein of keeping things simple, not radically changing what you're doing. For those of you in the K-12 or dual enrollment space, EdSurge has put together a great resource page of a number of the articles and other lists of resources that have been coming through. Dr. Corinne Hyde has 12 tips for online learning. She is an instructor of educators at University of Southern California. She does all of her teaching online, and she has a great set of tips there. Jesse Stump at Jessifer has been really gracious about sharing his resources. He has a sample course up. He's shared the messages he's been sending to students. And then he also is a big proponent of ungrading, so he has some tips around that. And then, as I mentioned earlier, at Hope for College has a guide, which I'm sure they'll be updating, on supporting students with basic needs during this time.
So Devora, this is Ben Tankus, data analyst with Achieving the Dream. I'll be helping Devora with questions. So it looks like there have been a couple questions come through. First one is from Isaac. Is it possible to implement or incorporate online curriculum into a LMS?
Yes, you should be able to. It'll depend what learning management system your college is using, but most of them will allow you to put in permanent links. So anything that's online you can link to, whether that is a Zoom conference or a portal into an online curriculum like Plato. And that can be a great way to organize things, just because the LMS, you know, if we can kind of get students into the habit of logging into that every day, then they can see their list of tasks, and you can include those links to that type of curriculum on there. Great question.
Right, and then next question, we went through this a little bit, but looks like Brenda wanted a little bit more detail on any recommendations for virtual classroom services.
So I'm not familiar with all of them. As I said, every day I'm seeing more and more of them offering up free trials to help support the community of learners. Google, I have heard good things about Google Classrooms. If you're already a Google school, that may be the simplest and easiest. But you can also, you know, whatever, if your college or school district is already using an LMS, I would recommend going with that. I just saw Survey Gizmo is launching a new learning management system. I know nothing about that or if it's any good. I just saw that come across my Twitter feed this morning. I believe Canvas, Blackboard, Moodle, which are some of the big players, are all offering trials. I would just be wary of, if this is brand new for you, go with simple. So think about, do you really want to learn a learning management system, or would you rather just put together a quick Google Doc and use that to organize your course?
All right, and then next question, any tips for students who do not have access to an internet connection? And that is from Jenny.
Yeah, that's going to be tricky. So if they have phones, you know, mail service is still working, so we certainly could minimally be mailing out some packets, or if there's a place where people are coming to pick up food, we can include work that way. If they have access to phones and cell phones, then doing the group chats is going to be your best bet. And then you can always send links. I mean, students do a lot of work on their phones these days, so you can do an LMS or Google Docs or use Dropbox to send them assignments to do, and they can type them on their phone, or, you know, use talk to text and then send them back to you. So we are definitely going to have to be creative if students are just accessing via their phone, and find out how strong a cell service they have. For students in rural areas, you know, going to mail and really old school may be the better way to go. Oh, remember, ultimately our goal is just to keep students engaged and connected. The academics, you know, that's going to be a bonus if we can move them forward academically during this time.
And it looks like Sarita, one of our attendees, had the recommendation to use a personal cell phone and creating a Google Voice number specifically for students to contact me. So maybe that's a way to get around providing your personal phone number.
Yes, and I've done that in the past. It's really easy to do. So that can be a great way to handle that.
Right, and then another question from Jenny. What about courses that cannot be offered virtually, like automotive or health programs that require hands-on experience? This is a little bit more of a high-level question here.
Yes, but an important one. So part of that is going to be being really creative. Again, how do we keep students engaged? So especially with like the health services, we're probably, you know, students can't do clinicals right now. There's going to be some pauses, but I think really mining the existing resources to see, are there how-to videos they can do? Are there simulations out there that you can at least be having them watch and then do a discussion on, so that we're keeping them engaged with the material? Any of the theoretical material that's going alongside your lab time, having students do that now, so that when campuses reopen, all they have left to do is that lab work, would be another strategy. But we are, you know, there are some things that are just, with the short time frame, it's not going to be easy to be able to do virtual labs, you know, even gathering materials and equipment to mail out so students could do things in their home. We just don't have the luxury of the time for that. So I think in that case, you're really thinking about, how do I keep my students engaged? And is there some of the content that I can get out of the way so I can really dig deep and furiously fast through the lab work once campus reopens?
And it looks like one of our attendees provided some follow-up on one of the internet questions: what to do if students don't have internet. So it looks like some companies are installing and providing free internet for students. So that's something to keep an eye out for in your local areas. Next question, yes. Are there any resources for student tutoring services?
So I do know they are out there. Things like Khan Academy exist. I'm not super familiar with all of them. For those of you who are in college settings, if your college does have online programs, they may actually already have some tutoring set up virtually, so that would be worth looking into. Khan Academy for especially math and science is available. I do think also just doing Google searches, collecting resources, and then opening up those office hours to bring students in, and asking students to share the resources that they found. Again, it'll keep them engaged and help us move all of our students forward. And
in addition to Khan Academy, I've had really good experiences with Udemy, Udacity, and edx.org.
Thank you.
Yeah, those are three big program sites that have many different educational services, many of them free. The next question from Regina: are there additional considerations that a college faculty should allow for dual students who are adjusting to taking college college credits while dealing with their school district continuum of coursework? Yes, I think there's a couple of things to keep in mind. So especially if you have students who were just starting with you as we went into this pivot, making sure we do either just individual phone calls or again group chats, so that you can talk through the differences between college courses and their K-12 courses, what a syllabus looks like, how expectations might be different. I think we also need to really be prepared to answer questions or know who can answer questions for students about their progress, especially if they are close to graduation, because they're going to be very concerned about, are they getting credit for what they're doing? Is their graduation going to be delayed? So figuring those out. And then of course, depending on your local situation and how things are pivoting online, just helping students to navigate. If they do, you know, for our gateway programs, we'll hopefully be able to keep students all in one platform to still be working on both their high school and college credits. If for some reason you're in a local situation where they're going to have to be in two different platforms, giving students some tools and ideas of how to structure their day to maintain that. And there's been a few, oh, sorry, go ahead, Devorah. The one last thing I want to say is part of what makes our dual credit program so successful is that students really have that college identity. So really keeping them connected to the college, whether that's, you know, just referencing the college a lot. If the college is running some social media contests or just some interesting social media posts, making sure you're sharing those with your dual credit students so that we are continuing to foster that identity. All right, and then there has been some questions. We will make sure to send out this PowerPoint as well as all of the resources we just recently mentioned. So don't worry about that, about taking pictures of slides or anything like that. You will have these in your resources. And then it looks like next question from Celia. Any suggestion for dual enrollment programs that happen to be at the high school? In a normal scenario, a faculty member would visit the high school teacher to check on curriculum delivery. How could we proceed now?
Yeah, that's another excellent question. I would encourage you to be proactive and reach out to the faculty or department that would normally do that and see, you know, again, let's keep it really simple. Can you just set up a phone call or a video chat to be able to go through the roster and explain your plan for helping students to keep maintaining progress and moving forward? And then, you know, just ensuring that, I know there's also, you know, certification issues, and as I said, for students who are graduating, they're going to be really concerned with credits. So just asking around to figure out who is taking responsibility for those questions, which, you know, it may take a week to figure that out, but know that that is going to be something students are really worried about. But everybody is, you know, fielding this transition and trying to keep things moving forward. So I think it's absolutely worth being proactive, and don't wait for the college to reach out to you, because we want to make sure we're providing students as rich an experience as we can under the circumstances.
All right, any last minute questions? Look like we may have time for one more before the hour. All right, thank you everybody for attending, and we will certainly send out all of the information in this PowerPoint. Feel free to review that first video that we missed for your records. And thank you so much for all of the listening, and hope you all stay safe out there.
Great, thank you all. Please reach out if you have further questions.